NATO versus Russia. Have the Baltics already triggered a deadly countdown to a direct NATO-Russia confrontation? Russia fumes at Baltic states for allegedly joining Ukraine's drone war against Moscow. Kremlin claims Baltic airspace helped Ukraine target Russian cities with long-range drone strikes. Did the Baltics just trigger a much bigger NATO-Russia conflict with their alleged role? Moscow's warning. NATO now in Putin's crosshairs after the Baltic states' alleged involvement? Moscow claimed the Baltic states had provided air corridors for Ukrainian drones carrying out attacks inside Russian territory. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Galuzin said Moscow had verified the information, according to RT. Galuzin claimed Latvia and other Baltic republics allowed Ukrainian drones to reach civilian targets deep inside Russia. The allegations followed months of long-range Ukrainian drone attacks targeting Russia's Leningrad region and other areas. Russian officials also claimed several explosive-laden drones had crashed in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia during recent operations. Latvia's ruling coalition collapsed in May amid political disputes over its response to Ukrainian drone incursions. Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo said he raised the issue with Zelensky and described the drone flights as unacceptable. Estonia also reported intercepting several drones that entered its airspace during recent months. Estonia said it was unhappy about the incursions but would not ask Ukraine to halt the operations, its foreign minister told the Financial Times. Russia's Security Council secretary had earlier warned Moscow could invoke Article 51 of the UN Charter if necessary. Shoigu said Russia could claim the right to self-defense if NATO states knowingly provided airspace for Kiev's drone operations. Russia claimed 4 FAB-500 guided bomb strikes destroyed a Ukrainian drone control hub in the Donetsk region. Russian Defense Ministry visuals shared by RT showed a UAV guiding the precision strike onto its designated target. The released footage showed a massive explosion, followed by thick black smoke billowing over the strike location. Russia's Defense Ministry also claimed its forces captured the strategic settlement of Kostiantynivka during ongoing operations. Moscow further claimed its troops took control of Vasilevka and 4 additional settlements in the Kharkiv region. The Russian Defense Ministry said UAVs struck the Kantsarovka oil terminal and a nearby fuel depot during the operation. Russia also claimed its drones destroyed a Ukrainian UAV storage site as part of the same wave of strikes. Moscow added that Su-34 fighter aircraft carried out airstrikes against targets in the Donetsk and Sumy regions. The Defense Ministry said Russian air defenses also intercepted more than 500 Ukrainian aerial targets during the period. Moscow claimed the intercepted weapons included FP-5 cruise missiles, as well as HIMARS multiple launch rockets. The attacks came as Russia said its recent mass strikes focused on Ukraine's defense industry and military facilities. The Defense Ministry also claimed Russian air defenses intercepted around 13,000 aerial targets throughout June. Officials in Moscow say Russian forces shot down more than 500 Ukrainian air threats overnight on July 3, portraying the scale of the attack as unprecedented and their defensive response as coordinated and effective. According to Russia's Defense Ministry, Ukraine launched 494 long-range drones, 9 HIMARS projectiles and 10 Flamingo missiles, underscoring Kiev's reliance on large-scale standoff attacks to strike deep into Russian territory. These developments were formally reported by Russia's Defense Ministry on July 4, as part of an official briefing that aimed to shape public perception of the overnight clashes and reassure domestic audiences. Moscow argues that Ukraine launched these strikes to distract both its own citizens and foreign allies from what Russia calls Kiev's battlefield failures, claiming the drone barrages are more about messaging than military success. The ministry added that any Ukrainian bid to damage Russian civilian sites will not go unanswered, warning that Moscow will respond by expanding its security zone and increasing pressure on targets inside Ukraine. The statement said, and I quote, "Zelensky's attempt in this way to divert the attention of Ukrainians and foreign sponsors from the consequences of the Russian strike on July 2, 2026 against military facilities near Kiev. And the catastrophic failure of the armed forces of Ukraine in Konstantinivka was thwarted by actions of Russian air defense systems." Air targets were neutralized under the unified command of the main command of the Russian aerospace forces. On all the lines of the air defense system created by professional and courageous actions of the combat. Crews of the anti-aircraft missile troops, mobile firing groups, and fighter and army aviation crews. Unquote. Russia says that, in June alone, it destroyed roughly 13,000 Ukrainian air threats, a figure intended to show both the intensity of Kiev's long-range campaign and the constant pressure on Russian air defense systems. Moscow further claims that many of these drones and missiles were produced with backing from a majority of European countries, including the UK, using this narrative to frame Europe as a direct participant in the war. Earlier, Vladimir Putin called for a prolonged analysis of Western involvement in the conflict, suggesting that Russia will systematically review each foreign actor's role in prolonging the war before deciding how to respond.
What I'd like to point out is that the more strikes the enemy attempts to launch against our civilian facilities, and of course, we must first and foremost do everything necessary to protect these facilities and defend civilians. But the more attempts the enemy makes of this kind, the bigger the security zone we will need to create in the surrounding territory, especially since, just like the other territories we are discussing today, this is historically Russian land. In addition, there should be a continued analysis of each instigator's involvement in prolonging the war in Ukraine. An analysis must be conducted on the engagement of each of them in actual hostilities. We need this analysis for making possible responsible decisions in the future. In any case, it could be necessary.
From July 2nd, Russia launched a large-scale air and ground assault on Ukraine, combining missile barrages and offensive operations on the front lines to try to force Kyiv into a more vulnerable position. Moscow then declared the capture of Kostyantynivka in eastern Ukraine, while also conducting air raids in Sumy and Zaporizhzhia regions, touting these moves as signs that Russian forces are gaining ground. In response, Ukraine launched a massive drone barrage targeting Russia's biggest cities, extending the war far beyond the front line and signaling that major urban centers are now part of the battlefield. Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian strikes also targeted Kronstadt, which hosts a significant military site, highlighting Kyiv's focus on hitting bases that support Russia's naval and aerial operations.